Yeah, making another video. Yay. Anyway, conference report. Yeah, did some misty video. And sort of, again, kind of just ragging on this fundamentalism idea. But, he used Einstein as an example. Einstein using the mechanism, the imagination mechanism of riding a light beam. And, some of that science actually is pretty bad. I think it's created a lot of, I don't think it's accurate. I don't think, you can't do that, actually. Matter can't do that. Matter can't travel at the speed of light. And it can't, I think, for reasons that the Einstein metaphor don't make obvious. Because Einstein was searching for the foundation. He was searching for the fundament. He was looking for the mechanism that would explain it, that would make it possible to visualize it, to understand how it works. And so that's the irony of this, is that the truth is in these foundational concepts. And it's our lack of ability to find the foundational concepts, and our having to do this reverse engineering to start off in this middle ground and then start dissecting the truth out of the material and going up also to the big. But this idea that we're trying to find the core function, the core idea. And if we're going to explain a subject now in hindsight, the ones we have conquered, like a lot of evolution, we don't bother explaining it from the top down. We do explain it from the bottom up, from the fundamental principles. That was the key contribution of Darwin, was, natural selection. This idea that selection takes place through environmental competition. And it's a key concept. It's foundational to the function of this process of evolution. And it's made possible because of this foundational function of replication and mutation. And so, it's just making my argument for me in a sense. So I didn't want to get into a whole bunch of physics stuff, but it's sort of, I think it's sort of interesting. So I guess I'm going to do some. Einstein, when he was riding the beam of light, the purpose was to say, okay, what's, from a light beam's perspective, what's possible, what's happening, what's going on in the universe. But the real point of relativity was the fact that somehow beams of light, when they're initiated, don't have momentum. They can't be propelled faster. So Einstein didn't bother, though, because he didn't have a mechanism for it, going to that point of initiation and saying that's the reason why there's no additional speed, is because the point of initiation doesn't provide for the possibility of it. So I've suggested that you could just create that explanation with the idea of a clock speed or a Planck constant, a checkerboard that the universe functions on, and that the pieces, the quanta, only move one square at a time. They are all or nothing. They're here, and next clock tick, they're there. And so there would be no momentum when a photon moved, because from a photon's perspective, it's moving on the smallest square on the board. It can't do anything else but move one Planck constant per clock tick. It can't do anything else. It doesn't have a choice. It can't have momentum because it is the fundament, the foundational bit that runs the whole byte matrix. The whole complexity of your computer can be reduced to these single little operations taking place. Tiny deer over there. That's the mother, but the little one's ahead of her. Anyway, probably can't get a picture of that. Very cute and such, though. All right. So anyway, where else do I want to go? Reverse engineer. So anyway, yeah. So Einstein, and then even when Einstein talks about gravity, right? So he gives us this analogy, of bent space, of a symbolism, where gravity is created, the well of gravity is created by mass. And so we have this idea of a flat material dimpled by mass, and then things being trapped in the dimples, trapped in the wells created by the weight. And it's mathematically a very good model. It fits the math, it helps illustrate the math, but is it the truth? Certainly we can't visualize it in 3 dimensions, which is, gives it a kind of that sort of fails a little bit, because it's not very 3-dimensional. It doesn't scale to the 3rd dimension. Is it also the truth? And so I could have a counter explanation that would create the same phenomenon, where I'm suggesting that, my new theory is that, all movement is not in the thing you're seeing moving. So I'm moving right now. I'm not moving. This big piece of matter isn't moving. What's moving are the little bits. They're the things moving. So it's just an illusion of perception, that you're seeing the big thing because that's all you can see. So you're saying the big thing is moving, but it's really the initiation of the movement is in the little bits. The little bits are changing their orientation and moving. And so this goes back to my whole point about even light. Light isn't initiated, it isn't created. It's released. It's captured and released. That's all the universe is capture and release. There is no creation. That's the transformation. And when something is compelled by gravity, when it's grabbed by gravity, it's really not being anything. All of the force is in the thing affected by the gravity. It merely changes its orientation and moves, more of it moves in the direction of the gravity. So in a theoretically, what I'm basically saying is that there's a bunch of trapped light inside of me. And if I'm falling with gravity, what's happening is the gravity has rearranged my matter, and now more of the light is moving in the downward direction. More of the photons and quanta and electrons inside of me are moving that way, down, towards the gravity. So all they've done is change their orientation on the checkerboard. So you can sort of just imagine that the quanta don't care where they're going. They just care that they go in a direction. And so if I was to argue you can move them in terms of directionality, you can change their direction without applying energy. And so they don't care which way they're going. And the thing that changes is, I suppose, is when they're locked up. So for individual quanta, let's say, that we couldn't detect in the universe because it's too small for us to detect. This is another thing that people just still don't quite get. But you can't see things that can't affect things you can see. So you have to be able to detect the influence of something by detecting the influence on things you can actually detect. So obviously once things get small enough, you're not going to be able to detect them because you can't detect their influence. Because they always have to influence something bigger than them. And, bouncing bounced a piece of paper against me. Well, that didn't do anything. So obviously something that size isn't going to create any change in me that you're going to be able to detect. So this is going to be completely invisible in terms of its existence. But anyway, that's a side issue. The point I was getting to was the gravitational thing. Was just that it's the orientation of the quanta that are basically just doing this mechanical movement that dictates what a piece of matter is doing at any particular time. And when something is stationary, relative to your perspective, it's moving the same as you are, it just means that on balance, that's its state. It's equilibrium in terms of nothing's, if you're unbalanced, it's unbalanced the same way. I guess is the only way I can say this. You might not be able to detect the imbalance, but it's probably there. There is probably a neutral state, an ultimate neutral. But the point is all this could happen by merely distorting orbits of the subatomic particles within the atoms, and that will create the obligation for the quanta to move in a direction as a collective, as a school. Instead of swarming around each other, they swarm around each other in a direction. And since the clock speed of the universe is like 9 gazillion frames per second, you don't see the fact that it's the quanta doing the moving, because they're probably doing it in a step at a time kind of way. But that's what's happening. So anyway, back to the gravitational thing. So it's just a change in orientation. So when bodies become associated to each other, it changes orientation. It doesn't change. There's no physical force exchanged. There's merely no physical force exchanged. Yeah, there's no physical force exchanged that we can detect. Like I said, on the quanta level there might be, but on the level we can see there isn't any bestowing of energy to change configuration. And whatever energy something acquires in the process of falling towards another body, that energy required to move it is coming from inside of it. But it's not energy it loses. It's not expending energy. It's merely doing the same movement it would do anyway, because all the quantas are moving at the speed of light. It's just that it's changed their overall directionality. So again, changing direction doesn't change energy. And that's what conserves the energy and makes gravity understandable as a non-force. It's not forcing something. It's merely changing construction, orientation, and that could be perfectly sensibly illustrated as a change in the board space itself. So Einstein's stretching of space may well may well create the same effect, in the sense that the reason why quanta move in a particular direction might be because the piece of the game board is stretched in front of them or stretched to the side of them, and that might be what decides which way they go, is what piece of the universe, what angle of the universe is pulling on them in terms of having stretched space. So one could argue that light might move because space has been stretched in front of it. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And so you just need to stretch some other space to move it in another direction. Seems reasonable to me. Anyway, so I didn't want to go on that much physics. I just want to get to the point that, that this model building is a fundamental process. That it does, the real goal is to find the fundamental principles. And then you have all these answers are so much easier once you establish those fundamental principles. And people like Conference Report want to talk like we haven't established any of those for some large segment of important knowledge. That there's somehow we don't have the fundamental principles. And we have them for evolution. We have them for compound matter. And frankly, I think the argument can surely be made that everything relevant, every question of meaning, can be answered by the biological process of evolution. It defines our function, defines everything about us, and it surely doesn't provide any room for ultimate purposes in the universe or any of that. We're just mechanical devices built by billions of years of warfare, battle botting, and we're just a surviving design, one of the surviving options, and there's nothing more to say in terms of purpose. Now, functionality, there is more to say, but that again is answered by our psychology, and that we create the need before we create purpose. We make purpose out of need, and the need is in fact unnecessarily created. It has no pure origin. It has merely the contrived function of survival meaning something, which it doesn't. So anyway, I think that's probably enough, something like enough, somewhere around enough. Yeah, I believe so. People roaming about my pool. Evil, evil, evil. Anyway, till next time. Alright, a little bit of an add-on, just in case I left a misimpression. You're always going to do that with these physics videos. Anyway, so let's say there's a body of matter. So what I'm saying is that when gravity affects something, it's affecting each individual quantum inside the matter. And there requires no force to change directionality, to effectively create an impulse to move in a direction. But when you try to push something, what's happening is you're not affecting all the quanta inside the matter. You're just pushing on a few of them and attempting to get the matter to move. And so what has to happen is the matter inside, the entire piece of matter you're pushing on, has to be rearranged before the matter can start to move in the direction you want to move it in. So that's why it requires so much force. So much force, in fact, that you will compress the matter you're pushing on in this effort to convey to the matter that, yes, you're going to have to rearrange to have some, the net balance of your arrangement has to be such that enough of your matter has to be moving in the direction that I'm pushing. And so you're basically, the force you're applying isn't for any other purpose than rearranging the internal matter inside the object. And so once you change its arrangement, then it establishes that new steady state of momentum. But you have to, it's the force you have to apply is the force, because you're not rearranging the matter from the inside out, you're rearranging it from the outside in. which is much more complicated. So